Let's Talk JMMA with Charlie Jewett from sogo-kaku.com. This is a podcast about the deep end of the Japanese combat sports scene. I'm your host, Shu Hirata from On the Road Management. Now, let's begin. Hey, good morning.
Good evening, Shu. How you doing?
Good. How are you? And
Doing pretty well.
good morning, good evening to everybody who is listening to this podcast. And let's dive into our first subject, which is the Rising Landmark. It just finished a few hours ago.
Yes.
Did you watch?
Yeah, I watched it with my wife and some friends.
And
Had a little party.
So apparently you bought a pay-per-view, right?
Yes, I did.
And I
The
remember
pay-per-view went much better than last time. Last time there was
Now,
a
let me ask
whole
you,
outage because it was so popular on Unext,
Okay.
I believe.
Now, this Landmark show was streamed on 9 different platforms, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
Just streamed on a bunch. We bought it from the Rising Live website.
Okay, so not the Unext.
No.
Okay.
We just I mean, it's probably just a laziness thing that Rising Live has all my information saved, and it's so much easier for me to order something off of them. But
Right.
also last time there was the server outages with Unext, so Rising Live just seems
Exactly,
more reliable.
Right. All right. So now, how was it? I think you mentioned the first 2 fights sucked the energy out of you. Is that what happened?
My wife fell asleep,
You fell
and
asleep.
my friend was just kind of like quietly staring off into space. And I was also like getting a little sleepy because, I mean, it's not fair to do it, but the Landmark 1 show was such an exciting show, top to
Mhm.
bottom.
Yeah.
They really got it right. When you only have 4 or 5 fights, you can't put a boring fight on there.
Sure, of course, right.
And especially when my whole thought was, I felt like Landmark was kind of marketed more towards a new fan base, kind of like maybe casuals or young people.
Okay.
And for those types of people, you want to have, I'm not saying they have to be finishes, but they need to be exciting fights. And the first fight especially just really sucked the energy out of the room.
Koro against
Yes,
this one, right. And actually,
and not to speak badly about Koro, but it just seemed like this seems like, based off of what Rising has said, more of a trigger fight. I mean, the whole marketing behind him was that in the VTR was he has 40 fights, but it's like
he's a veteran,
50-50.
right.
So that seems like more trigger, but it also seemed like more of their marketing angle was, oh, he trains with Seika Izawa and Ushiku.
Right.
They just seemed to be, and then like during his fight, they were showing Seika Izawa. They had like a little separate camera for her. So it seemed almost as if it was just like, let's put him on there because then we can talk about Seika Izawa, who they're probably booking against Ayaka Hamasaki in the near future.
Probably, right, for a title fight. And what about the second fight, though? This was supposed to be an exciting fight with a full swing warrior, usually, right?
My wife and her friends, and people were excited because they're both super active and full swing versus Psycho, so it's kind of a fun nickname battle. But there were some fun scrambles. There were some fun moments in this fight. I think it just suffered from the fact that the first fight really sucked the energy out, so we needed something more to kickstart our interest back into it. And this one kind of had some clinching and grinding affairs.
All right, but the third fight, which is the Yoshinari Nadaka, that must have woke you guys up, no?
It did. So this fight was, I was hoping it would, because I was like, oh, when my wife saw that he was fighting like an 18-year-old, she was like, oh yes, this is going to get the energy back in the room. And it did. I mean, for the first few seconds, it looked like his opponent was actually going to be a decent, like he was game. He was bringing it to him. And then he was just too aggressive and got dropped and then knocked out. It was great. It was exactly what we needed.
I mean, I'm telling you right now, since it's obvious the tension is leaving Rizin this year, you know, I think Yoshinari is going to take over in terms of a spot that Tenshin had as a kickboxing star, obviously. I mean, his resume is impeccable, basically.
Right. Well, there's this weird marketing angle. Now they kept bringing up like, oh, ever since he had his fight with Sakakibara, ever since he had his argument with Sakakibara, I think the announcers kept talking about that. And my whole thing was, that didn't really seem like an argument or a fight. It seemed like Sakakibara asked Yoshinari to do something unreasonable, and Yoshinari said no.
Yeah, I guess, right. And also the fact is that I think at this point, like how he had Sakakibara had a little bit of problem with the Kleber, and now it's all okay. Now he had a little bit of problem with the Yoshinari, now it's all okay. I think the whole industry kind of thinks that, okay, we could get into a little problem with the Sakakibara, but he'll be fine in a couple of days.
Well, do you think it's even a real problem? Do you think now because the problem has been that Yoshinari delivers very exciting fights, but it really hasn't picked up that much traction. Do you think now by saying like, oh, he's had fights with Sakakibara, they're trying to make his name well known?
I think it's honestly Sakakibara is a little bit upset because what happened was Yoshinari wanted to fight Tenshin. That was the reason why he came to Rizin, and he was doing the test matches, bringing up his weights little by little. But the bottom line was it was just too short of a notice, So it was just smart for him to take this fight. It's just professionally a right decision, I think. And I think, honestly, genuinely, I think Sakakibara was just upset. So he just kind of, blasted at the press conference and probably got thousands of email complaining. So he kind of came back to his senses, right? And
I agree with you. I think he was initially upset, but I now think they're using that to market him.
Of course, right? Yeah. Now that whole thing he got upset made him more famous, right?
Right, exactly. I think I 100% agree that Sakakibara looked like he threw a tantrum when Yoshinari was like, I'm not going to move up in weight and fight arguably the best kickboxer on short notice.
Here's what it is. I think Japanese fans are a little too hard because think about what Dana White says at the press conference or to the media. You know what I mean? Compared to that, what a little upset, by Sakakibara is like nothing,
Right. But it is interesting that Rizin would then use this to promote him. Where I feel like the UFC wouldn't, like Dana White's ego is kind of too big. He wouldn't let the fact that he got in a fight with someone be used to promote them. I feel at least that's what it seems to be.
Right. But I think, I think it's just that I think it's different culture too. But at the fact that how, like Sakakibara took like 20 minutes to explain it to the fans that he didn't mean that way and blah, blah, blah. That's two huge difference from how Dana White deal with the fight media.
I absolutely hate those press conferences where all it is Sakakibara talking about something for 30 minutes that could be explained in 2 sentences. And he always does it like before a fight announcement too. So everyone's watching, like, announce the fights.
Here's what it is. I mean, let me ask you this. For anyone who went to a business school in late 80s to early 90s, those 20-30 minute speech by Sakakibara must be very interesting because those are the era that everybody studied Japanese business. Like how you're supposed to say yes or no, that type of stuff. So anyway, So I think the bottom line now is I think everybody know that, sure, you could get into a little beef with Sakakibara, but you can always come back because the bottom line is he's a promoter, businessman. So if he see a plus side to it, right, he'll come back and sit on the table with you.
On like a different version of that would be Saeki and Deep has always showed that if you, even no matter what you say, if you're willing to fight for the promotion, he can get some juice out of you. He'll put you on a card. Right. I think Rizin has shown that as well. I think Rizin has historically shown most of their beef seems to lay with management. They don't seem to have issues with fighters themselves.
That is true. That's so funny. Management with a promotion, right? I mean,
because look what their biggest
management.
Their biggest beefs are with what Musayev's manager would do that weird stuff from time to time.
That's true, right? Yeah,
like the crazy tweeting, and then the Koike thing seemed to be almost all manager related.
It is, and I wonder, like, this was in America, that his new manager will be in public, will be announcing, I signed, clever, blah blah blah. Till this date, his new manager is not even in public. I mean, nobody knows, right? I mean, it's pretty weird because,
for all we know, it could be Rizin.
That too, but what's so funny? Like, I think I'm sometimes criticized by the Japanese fans for tweeting, saying like you're the only manager tweet. So, but in America, that's totally different, right? I mean, outside Japan, everybody, all the managements releases their news, and
Well, I think it's because a lot of Japanese managers don't seem to market their fighters. They seem to just kind of sit back and get them fights, but they don't take the Western approach of like marketing them to try to get sponsorship deals and things like that.
That's true. And it's hard to even find the websites or Facebook page or Twitter page or Instagram page of the management too. So I guess it's a different thing, in Japan. Yeah. Anyway, so go back to Landmark. What about the last two fights? I mean, okay, the Shoji versus Suzuki finished pretty fast, right? I mean,
while the fight before that, the Yoshinari fight, like brought us back around. The Suzuki fight was like the adrenaline shot that this card needed because he and Shoji both came out. It was very obvious, like they're going to swing. And I don't know why. I mean, Shoji's a good striker, but Suzuki's an elite level kickboxer. He was an elite level kickboxer.
Right.
And he just absolutely lit Shoji up. And it was like a brutal finish because it didn't happen with one punch. He gets Shoji to go down and get back up.
Right. I mean, Shoji even said the day before the fight he's going to do the lay and pray. I mean, there's no sign, right, of him trying to even take him down.
I think Suzuki controlled the fight all the time, and Shoji like never had a chance because it happened so quickly. I don't think Shoji had a time to like do that. He just got hit immediately. I think he kind of reverted to brawling mode.
Right. I mean, okay, this is on my honest feeling about this is this. When I saw Suzuki fighting Hagiwara the last time, I thought Suzuki would do much better. Meaning, I was quite disappointed with his performance. But now he came back and beat Shoji. So in terms of in the Rizin MMA division, I guess he can't come back, right? So he's now being considered to be one of the top guys in featherweight, maybe,
undefeated on Landmark shows as well.
Right. So
Well, I mean, the Hagiwara fight, he showed he was incredibly hesitant. And that hesitancy really cost him that fight. In this fight, he was not hesitant at all. He just went straight at Shoji and was like, I'm a striker. I'm going to throw punches and kicks and see what happens.
Right. I mean, I guess, I think Shoji did a job, right? I mean, I guess that's what the Rizin needed in terms of this whole show. So,
yeah.
Now, everybody was still talking about this fight, the main event.
Yes.
Now, what do you think about this one?
The opening round was kind of crazy. The opening round was crazy because they were both like kind of wildly brawling. And Suzuki looked like in the beginning he kind of lit Hiramoto up and caused some swelling on both his eyes and then got him down. I mean, he landed some ground and pound where if it had gone on a little longer, I thought the fight might have ended. He was kind of doing that Khabib pose where he was holding one of Ren's arms and hitting him in the face. But then I think Suzuki then got hit by Hiramoto and realized that Ren can hurt him.
Yes.
Also, I think Suzuki got exhausted.
I think he injured his finger too, I think. Suzuki this round, yeah.
But I think he also felt the power of Ren and realized that he could get knocked out. And so then it turned into like, I'm an exhausted / don't want to get hurt. And I realized that Ren doesn't seem to be able to deal with my clinching that well.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm just going to clinch and try to trip him to the mat. And if the ref separates us, I'm just going to immediately clinch it again. I'm willing to eat the shot that it takes to get there because I feel safer the closer I am to him.
No, I think
Ren, for his part, I think Ren looked kind of frustrated in the second and third round.
Yeah.
But Ren had no answer for the clinching, and that's what cost him the fight. I mean, he was getting some good hits from his elbows. He was elbowing Suzuki well in the clinch and doing things like that, but not enough to erase what happened in the first round.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah, and also, I mean, he did show. All right, I'm his manager, so I'm going to be a little bit of bias, but he did show a vast improvement in terms of takedown defense, and he showed that he can get up from being on the bottom. But
there was one moment, I think, where Suzuki got him in full mount, and then Ren got up quite quickly from that position.
Right.
So it seemed like he was struggling with the clinch itself, because once he got to the mat, he seemed to be able to respond to that.
Right. I think
he didn't seem to be able to respond to just being held.
Right, and more of a clinch on the corner,
Yeah.
I mean, even though he initiated the takedown, which he couldn't execute the takedown, but when ended up in the clinch, but he could have pushed it to the corner, but couldn't, right? That Suzuki switched pretty quickly, and so that shows in terms of clinching power, Suzuki was superior, and he knew that department, and he was superior, right? So
I think he was shorter, and I think he was able to get beneath Hiramoto a little bit and just use leverage to kind of pin him to the corner.
Right. And of course, I mean, I think it's obvious that I think Ren needs to get more experience in fighting because he could train as much as he can train, but the fight experience you could get on fights are completely different. That's one part he really have to, work on. So
Ren's got a hell of a chin, though. I mean, Suzuki cracked him with some shots in that first round.
Right.
And it didn't look like it phased Ren at all.
No, he was like that in kickboxing fights too. He always took a lot of shots, but came back very well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, it looked like Ren's face fine. It looked like he had some significant swelling under both eyes.
But it's not broken. I did talk to him right after the fight, and yeah, he's fine, and it's a little swollen. He'll go back to training, as maybe he'll rest maybe a week or so and go back to training. And I did communicate with Duke Rufus and Sergio Perez too, and I think it's obvious that he needs to get more experience, like I said, and I think Rizin is doing maybe 2 shows in April, maybe a show in May, and June. Obviously, there's no show because it's Tenshin versus Takeru.
Right.
So I'm thinking April is way too soon, right? Obviously,
Right.
So ideal is that I kind of like to squeeze in one fight between now and maybe July Rizin somewhere else. I think that's the right thing to do for him as a competitor. It's better for him.
What kind of opponent do you see in his future?
Less than 2 pro fights.
What?
Less than professional fights or 3 professional fights, whatever. I mean, he's got to go back and train. I mean, the fight in his own, record, similar record, right, and similar experience in terms of ring cage experience in MMA.
Is he the same? What weight class was knee in? You got to get that bouncer back.
Really honestly, like I see a lot of people saying like, well, he should go back to Shuto and do this, he should go back to maybe deep and do that and blah blah blah. But I'm telling you this right now, from management's point of view, when you see him as a talent instead of a competitor, I don't think it's quite right to put him into those shows, to tell the truth.
Well, I mean, Rising has landmark and trigger shows now. So they can give him the level of competition that Shuto or Deep would give him.
Right. I mean, exactly. So that's my point. So even for trigger and landmark shows, that makes sense, right? However, also at the same time, I don't know. I'm gonna have to talk to Rizin, but it may even make sense for him to get a fight in America.
Yeah.
Some feeder shows. Who knows?
Yeah.
Get experience going in the cage show, and it's always not a bad idea to fight in local show where it's not as fancy as the other places.
Well, he doesn't have the pressure. You just go in there and no one knows who he is.
But in a way, it's a big pressure too because you're there. There's nobody else he knows and stuff like that. So,
well, I remember I think Rising has shown some. I think they did that in the past. They tried to with Rizin Yamamoto because I remember Rizin Yamamoto and Miyu at one point in time were both scheduled to fight for some local promotion, like in
I remember
Wisconsin
the King of the Cage.
King of the Cage or something.
And they some opponent kind of didn't show up or something happened.
Right.
Didn't make a way. I forgot, but so yeah.
That always seemed to me like Rising was trying to let Rizin get some developmental experience outside of Rising.
So I'm totally open to that. He could be fighting a King of the Cage. I mean, because Shingo used to, the matchmaker Rising used to work for King of the Cage.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he was the matchmaker there. So
interesting.
Yeah, and it's a good thing you mentioned that. I forgot about it.
Well, I remember that. For some reason, I remember it was all of a sudden like this seems really weird, and then like Rizin dropped out, but Miyu was still on the card, and then I think Miyu dropped out or something.
That's right. I mean, yeah, exactly. So I'm all into like getting him more experience.
Yeah.
And why not try to get a fight in maybe May and try to get a fight in maybe July? If he's healthy, even get a fight in September. At this point, he's bottom. He lost 2 in a row. only thing he can do is to climb up, right? So, and I think I want him to do it in the right way. I mean, he fought veteran in the first fight. I mean, not real super veteran, but both fighters have way more experience than he is in MMA. So, I mean, it's good, you know. Yeah.
Well, Suzuki was kind of a odd choice by Rizin because he's a good enough kickboxer, I think, to like be able to defend himself against what Ren's doing. And it's very clear that based off his post-fight and pre-fight comments that he's been focusing almost exclusively on MMA now. And so that's where we saw all the clinching and takedowns coming from. It was interesting. But yeah, I'd love to see Ren on some local shows just to get some experience, to get some confidence, and just figure out everything, piece everything together. Because he's clearly a very marketable big star.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I don't want to put in Deep or Shoot or Pancras, because once we put into those shows, he's going to be one of them from a marketing point of view. It really is. I'm going to avoid that. I'm telling this public right now. I'm trying to avoid that, you know?
Yeah.
And it only makes sense, right? And it's not only about the money, too, you know? For him,
for his next fight,
it's fine, you know?
Do you think the next fight is kind of like a must-win situation?
For Ren?
Because he's such a big talker that I feel like people are talking about the fact that he lost despite talking a bunch of shit before the fight.
Well, here's what it is. I think he put a lot of pressure on himself, and then it's, you know, like when you talk like that, and of course, if he loses it, his anti-fans is going to just attack him, right? Which is probably happening right now. But it's not like he totally got dominated and didn't even show no improvement. You know what I mean? Like none of that, right? So I think he still left a little bit of a, you know, I think people can still see hopes from, you know, like you think he might do well. I mean, just give him a little experience. And like, you know, I will admit, first two fights, I think we took a route of so-called Japanese MMA, which is, you know, like, remember, like we're going to talk about this later, but a guy who retired before this was Mr. Omigawa. On his very first professional fight, he fought Aaron Riley, who had over 30 professional fights. It would never happen in the States, right? Never. But almost the same way, right? You know?
I think Ham Sohee made her professional debut in Japan against Hisei Watanabe.
Exactly, right.
Japan's very into you're a new fighter? Would you like to fight a champion?
Right. I mean, I'm telling this right now. I can reveal this right now because it's a long time ago. When I was managing Roger Gracie, you know, we had a difficulty deciding his first fight for Rizin. You know what I'm not Rizin, I'm so Dream. You know what they suggested? They're like, well, what about Alistair Overeem? I'm like, dude, Alistair, he has so much MMA fights. I mean, why do you want to do that? But their mentality was this, well, yeah, but if you beat Alistair, he'll be a star overnight. You know, I get it. You know, of course you could be a star overnight, but that's different in sports, you know?
That's so crazy because I don't understand that. I mean, I understand what they're trying to do, but yeah, I don't get it because they did Kron Gracie so much better. They had Kron Gracie fight the right level of talent.
Exactly, right. So the bottom line here is like Ren, sure, I think, you know, we took a chance on Hagiwara. And Suzuki's obviously he had like 7 MMA fights already. So it's sure, you know.
I mean,
but
also the kind of crappy thing with that situation is you get young prospects like your Rizin Yamamoto's who Rizin puts so much pressure on him. I mean, he's on the poster of the very first event.
Right.
And then they give him just awful matchups. They give him like Tokoro and Kron Gracie. And then they wonder why he kind of stops fighting. It's like you matched this guy against legitimate, a 40-fight veteran and a guy that's you matched a grappler against one of the best Brazilian jiu-jitsu guys in the world.
Exactly. So it's
like, what do you expect?
Right. But it's not that bad in terms of Ren's opponent so far.
Right,
you know?
right.
But that's why he showed okay against guy who had 6, 7, 8, 10 fights. You know what I mean? So,
I mean, do you want to put Hiramoto? I'm going to be biased because I absolutely love mixed rules matches. Like it's one of my favorite staples of like old school Japanese MMA was like the Shinyaoki Gianotsu mixed rules match,
I remember.
or the Gianotsu Kintaro,
Kikuno,
the Kikuno mixed rules fight. And I think Ren Hiramoto at this point, do you put him in like a mixed rules fight? Because there's so much fun behind those.
It is fun behind it, but no. My answer is no, and I don't think Kuramoto will agree. Will want to do a mixed fight. I think he still want to concentrate on MMA, and I think he should. I think now, I think we all know this is sports. So if he won one of these two fights, it's lucky. But we all totally expected him to go 0-2 at this point against relatively experienced fighter. So now, in a way, the party's over. I think he should go back to what a real competitor should do, which is to go back and fight the guy who maybe had two pro fights or one pro fights, whatever. That's what everybody do, right? I mean,
and I will say that the one nice thing about Japanese MMA is that they don't necessarily care about your record so much.
Exactly, right.
And so unlike in the US, where like in the US, I feel like there's this whole thing like if you're not undefeated, you're not a very good fighter. It's kind of got like a little bit of that boxing mentality. Whereas in Japanese MMA, it's like they care more about what you did in those fights, like the quality of the fights and what have you done recently. So if he wins a couple fights in a row, I could see him being right back up near the top of a Rizin.
Exactly. Not only that though, but in terms of like in American matchmakers too, like let's say if he wins next 6-7 fights, right? Made his record back up to 7-2 or even 8-2, I can always make that excuse, about the first 2 losses. It's no big deal. It was against a much more experienced guy. And maybe he'd be in the bantamweight by then. And I can always make that excuse. Oh, that was back in 145. Who cares? That's out. Kind of stuff. So I'm telling you. So I'm a manager. So it's my sales talk, and it makes sense, right? And I always thought that maybe Ren should go down to 135 anyway. So that's another subject I'm gonna have to talk to him and his coach. But
he'd be pretty tall for 135. I feel like.
Yeah, right.
He looked significantly taller than Suzuki, but I don't know if that's because Suzuki was hunched over.
That too, but I think, exactly. But as a 135, the guy who's taller than them too in 135.
Yeah, true.
And realistically, if you really want to think about the UFC, I mean, he may be too small for 145. Really, right. I mean, unless he has something really good, like he's good wrestling and stuff like that. But that's not the case. So, I mean, I'm telling you right now, I really think he should fight. I think King of the Cage is a great idea. I'm going to shoot email to Shinko after this. I really think so. I mean, from marketing Japanese point of view, what if he wins in the cage show in America against an American guy? Like I said.
Yeah, because the Japanese don't care who you beat if it's a foreigner. It's like, oh, he beat a foreigner.
Exactly. To me, from my managing point of view, as talent, Ren Hiramoto, that's a much better way to do this than fight for deep shoot or pancreas. I'm sorry, Mr. Saiki. I'm sorry, Mr. Sakai. I'm sorry, Mr. Sakamoto. But really, I just think that way,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Well, anyway, so Landmark is done. And next, let's talk about Rising 34. They announced the card. What do you think about that card, honestly?
So I've often talked about, maybe I sound like a broken record, that I think Rising has kind of stretched themselves a little thin with the number of events they're trying to do.
Yeah.
And this card just reeks of that. I mean, does it have 8 kickboxing matches on it?
With a lot of kickboxing fights. And I think
it has 7 or 8 kickboxing bouts on it, which is, I like kickboxing, but I love MMA. And that's just, if I'm going to an MMA show, that's way too much kickboxing.
And a lot of guys are making quick turnaround, right?
Like I noticed that as well. So I was immediately I raised an eyebrow when I saw that Akita was fighting on this and Daisuke Nakamura, because they both fought like last month. And they both fought very recently.
Right. Daisuke just beat Omigawa, right? On his retirement fight.
Right, yeah. And
Akira just beat my client Suzuki. And
it's like an insane turnaround. And it's not like those were like first round finishes or anything. Those were fights.
Right. And they had to cut weight and stuff because I noticed that like Sora Yamamoto, he's a featherweight, but they had to match him at the catch weight of 68. So that means probably Sora couldn't cut weight that quickly, right? So
so it's to me showing they're stretched thin because they're putting these guys on there with really fast turnarounds. They're padding the card with kickboxing matches. And I think they're just hoping that Koji and the other Osaka guys will sell a bunch of Osaka tickets live, and that Hagiwara is popular enough to sell some pay-per-views as well. I think that's what they're kind of hoping for.
I think, I'm going to tell you this. One way to look at it is like, Rizin fans might kill me for saying this, but this Hagiwara against Yamasu is probably the weakest headliner ever in history of Japanese MMA in terms of big shows. But another way to look at it is this, because of the pandemic, how Rizin was sort of forced to use all the Japanese fighters. Mm-hmm. I think it kind of made a lot of Japanese fighters famous. At the same time, the market did react in a good way for the Rizin, in the sense that the ticket sales are still going well. They're still selling pay-per-views without getting non-Japanese fighters on the card, right? So they have created many stars,
Well, yeah, I agree that the pandemic provided the good thing about them having to use Japanese fighters is it allowed them to actually develop more than one Japanese star, because they always seem to focus on one or two people, and now they were able to focus on more than that and actually create more stars. Hagiwara is clearly a very popular fighter at this point, but I think they're trying to give him a winnable fight, if that makes sense. Because I have not been impressed with Dominator's rising career at all.
Yeah, unfortunately, even though he's a good guy. But again, the fact that he's so popular too, right? So that's popular. Kind of amazing. Maybe it's the part of the YouTube effect, or
Well, the one that boggles my mind is that Saito became incredibly popular.
And
if I'm just like, I don't see it. I don't know how he got popular. But
me too. I don't get it. And at this point, it's obvious. I'm gonna tell you this now, that we haven't been updating any of the Naoki Mizuki YouTube channels, because we feel that it's just doing the same thing as the others. It's just boring at this point.
Yeah.
And I rather want to, they rather want to be on another YouTube channel who's doing something more creative, or turn our YouTube channel into promotion for some other future project kind of stuff, Yeah.
Well, I will say I was kind of laughing. My wife's friend came over the other day, and she now apparently has a crush on Naoki Inoue. So Naoki is getting some female fans. So just watch out.
Right now, Naoki has a lot of female fans. I mean, look at all these gifts he gets at the gym. Many are females.
He's like a rock star.
Yeah. And I mean, I shouldn't. There's so many female business owners, or a business owner's daughter who is female, who really want to sponsor him.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
So I said something to the effect of, she was talking about him, and I was like, oh, I think he's probably single. And she said, well, I saw a picture of him on Instagram eating unagi don and I was thinking, who is he with? I
can tell this right now to your friend, that he was with his old roommate, which is a man. So don't worry.
So she can be comfort. She can relax. I told her calm down.
I'm telling you right now. I always ask Naoki, so did you date somebody, or did you have a girl? Did you have a girlfriend now? His answer is always no. And he's coming back to States soon, so he wants to go out and eat some Japanese food. He doesn't want to spend a lot of money to eat here. So he goes out every week, and he goes out with his coach. So I'm like, dude.
Yeah. Well, he's still young, still shy. Maybe Mizuki can help him get some confidence or something.
Well, I think he's just too anxious to get back into the ring. He's always thinking about get the loss out of the way, and he want to come back and win this and win that. But I really think he should go back to do more solid training on MMA wrestling and grappling and stuff like that too, because it's obvious anybody who's going to fight him next, we realize is his weak point, right? I mean,
he's got to get that grappling stamina up, get some good sparring in.
Right. So we'll see,
Yeah, but it's kind of interesting what you're talking about, that effect where these fighters got really popular, because it's almost as if some of the fighters got so popular, but they don't have the skill set to match that popularity.
Right. So they get so popular,
Rising has to put them in main events and stuff.
Exactly.
And then Rising, because Hagiwara is a fun fighter, but Hagiwara has absolutely terrible grappling.
I know.
And Hagiwara would, if he faced an elite grappler, I think he gets slaughtered almost. He gets slaughtered. Not to be mean or anything. I'm just saying his grappling is almost zero. But I think this is them trying to put him in a match that is winnable for him, and it's over a guy with a name.
Imagine if I put a guy like Majima, which is my client, against Hagiwara. Majima, I think. I mean, unless he gets hit, once you hit the ground or even the grappling, I don't think it's even close, right? I mean,
speaking of one of your clients, Kuramoto, they put his Imanari exhibition matches on YouTube now, and he jacked that guy's up. Like, it was that guy's face was swollen. It looked kind of like Sloth from Goonies. Like, it's just like that guy signed up for a grappling match and had no idea and no expectation that he was going to get palm fisted, just the living crap out of his face. Well, I've never seen a jiu-jitsu match where they do a doctor stop.
Right, exactly, right. I mean, again, it's not technically a jiu-jitsu match, right? Because you're allowed to, you know.
Oh, I know. But I'm just saying, like, his opponent obviously didn't expect
exactly not much, right? No, but go talk about Kuramoto too, because I think he looked great on Landmark Show. I mean, Trigger Show. We didn't talk about it, and Uruka did all right against Clever Koike.
Right? We didn't talk about that fight. No,
let's talk about that.
The biggest walkaway to me from that entire card was Kuramoto's back. I mean, he's not young; he's in his mid-30s, but a performance like that puts him right back into play. Yeah. He absolutely dominated his opponent.
You know what? I'm gonna tell you this again on the record, like all these guys who's listening to this show. Right after that fight, you know what I told Kuramoto? And I'm so sorry to Mr. Kenji Kato here, but I told him exactly, this is the weakest opponent you're ever going to get in Rizin. So I know you're celebrating right now, but you're going to go back to training pretty quickly, because next opponent you're going to get is way tougher than this guy. That's
I always joke that Kenji Kato was brought in to lose to Rizin Yamamoto. And that since he won that fight, they kind of like awkwardly kept him around.
Right.
But I was laughing because you said that Kuramoto was like, oh, I'm going to suplex him. And you were just like, no, you just need to like concentrate on winning the fight.
Right.
And I thought that the like comfortable middle ground was him just picking him up off the ground and slamming him down several times. But did his wife have any funny comments? I know that you said she had some pretty extremely direct comments after his first loss. I think my wife said she saw a video where the wife was just like, oh, your opponent was just stronger than you. Like, extremely direct Olympics champion mentality.
I did not hear from Mr. Kuramoto what did his wife say. You know?
Oh, I just thought it was so funny when he lost, and she just said like, "Oh, it's just because he was better than you."
Right. I mean,
such a soul-crushing comment.
It's a hard, tough, hardcore competitor. They're a gangster in that case.
Yeah,
exactly. Here's what it is. I think Kuramoto's case, how he lost to Yamaniha, and it took him a while to get back into the to the fight, of course, because he just didn't have an opportunity in Rizin. But now he's in the cage and has such a dominant performances, and many fans are now thinking, oh, he may be like one of the best in the cage. You know how like fans are discussing, well, he's better in the cage opposed to he's better in the ring.
Well, I think cages have always favored wrestlers.
Always, right.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about that, yeah.
Plus, I mean, he's very comfortable throwing grounded knees and soccer kicks.
Right.
And those are always cages if they're pushed up against, it makes them harder to move away from.
Exactly.
So it kind of fits his style very well.
Right. And the point is that, then his concern is the striking, right? So as long as he goes close enough and not to get like a solid strikes, then he's in good position, So
I've always thought his striking looks fine, looks good for a wrestler. I mean, I've always been willing to say that the Yamaniha fight, he had his eye injured almost immediately, and most other people, aka Johnny Cage, Satoshi would just like fall down and give up, where he kind of fought through it.
He fought through it, and he showed he has a heart and he has a skill set to kind of fought through, but he really didn't have not much answer for him, right?
Right.
But now he has this new, thing about the open palm and, different concept on how to win the fight. So, I think right now he's done with the Rizin contract. So right now I'm negotiating his new contract, and he's super healthy, and he's ready to go in April. So I do like to put him back right in there.
Yeah, I'd love to see him back because he's got the momentum. I want to see him back as soon as possible.
Right. But at the same time, I am hearing that there's a possibility for finally a Singapore UFC show in June. The people
really?
are talking about that. So,
is this one of those cases of like the UFC's Asian Contender Series? Like, I'll believe it when it happens.
Exactly. But again, if it's even the regular Rizin show, I'm hearing the Erie. They're going to put Erie as a title fight over there.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, and they might have a couple of spots open for the Japanese new signing, right? So who knows?
If they do a UFC Singapore show, I am so into it just because I want to see how one championship responds.
But here's what it is. There's one point I think people have to understand because of this pandemic. A lot of top fighters in Japan, I wouldn't use the word forced to, but they had no choice but to fight for Rizin. And many guys signed a multi-fight deal. Now, pandemic's almost over. I don't know if it's ever going to be over, but now UFC is starting this Asia show, start opening more spots. But then, a lot of top fighters in Japan have these contract obligations that they can't leave. So they're going to have a little difficulty in signing good top Japanese guys,
Well, that's one of the things I always said, like the pandemic did have some good qualities for Rizin. And one of them was they had access to a giant pool of fighters that can't leave.
Right. Exactly. That's the point. So, for example, like if I were Sean Shelby, I would be looking at a guy like Shinobu Ota. I wouldn't be surprised. I don't know anything about his contract status, but I would not be surprised if he has multi-fight deal with the Rizin.
Well, not just the UFC. You got to think like, Road FC just announced the schedule, so Road FC is back.
Too, right? One FC,
One FC there, and once these borders open up, if Rizin has a guy that feels like he's popular and he's not getting the attention he deserves, he'd leave.
Right. But here's what it is. So that's why I think it comes to the very interesting thing that no Japanese media write about this because nobody asks about this contract thing. Like in America,
they never talk about contracts.
But they should. Then they can make a predictions. Okay, this guy is done. In next fight, he's going to be done with the contract, which means he could end up in the UFC Singapore show in June. That's the kind of imagination fans enjoy, right? But like Japanese media never provide that aspect of a fighter's life,
Yeah. Oh yeah, they never ever talk about it.
No, but they should, I think, But anyway, so in terms of Kuramoto, or like even I think guy like Makoto Shinryu is undefeated, he's fighting in May, but if he wins, who knows, right? Kind of stuff.
We've already seen it kind of. I think Road FC tried to sneak Hagiwara away last year sometime.
And I tell you this right now, finally on the record, they did offer Uruka too.
Yes, people are poking. Other promotions are knocking at the door trying to get some of these guys.
Right. But again, some top guys are multi-fight deals. So you can't leave, right, in the middle of the contract unless you get a release or if they're generous enough to release you. So I think it's going to be interesting that even though let's say theoretically, if UFC starts doing Singapore show or Macau show, whatever that is, where Japanese doesn't need a work visa to fight, meaning, when they lose somebody on the last minute, couple weeks.
That's interesting.
Yeah, that's always the case because Macau, it's really interesting. Chinese need a work visa to fight in Macau, but Japanese doesn't. So no, it's really weird. So let's say
what was the card that Mizuki fought on? Was she in somewhere in China? Where was it?
Shenzhen. So it's different.
Okay.
Yeah, you know what's so funny? China is different. Like this, if you live in some other part, to enter Peking, you need a visa, or work in Peking, you need a visa, or something like that. Yeah. So even within the country, there's a lot of restrictions.
I remember when I went to China like 12 years ago. That you don't have the ability to work where you want. It was like you have to have permission to work where you're working.
Exactly, right. So your life
or else everybody would just go to Shanghai and Beijing. They have to we have to keep this under control.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of Chinese people told me that your life is half decided. That depends on where you were born. Yeah. But anyway, so exactly. So let's just say UFC Macau happens, and if somebody tested positive for COVID, or if somebody get injured, maybe
that's true with the whole COVID thing. You got to think that openings open up way more.
Well, and so 3 weeks into the show, it'll be too late to apply for the visa for any other country, right? Except, Japanese fighter, they don't need visa. So they're going to have to start offering those fights offered to Japanese fighters. But again, if you're in a multi-fight deal, you can't leave, right? So so this is going to be kind of interesting, I think. Yeah. So anyway, but Kuramoto right now, I think it's fair to say that he's going to re-sign with the Rizin, because he's not going to sit through till see if UFC is going to do Singapore show and stuff like that. So then I want him to go back to fight in April immediately.
Yeah, be great.
And Uruka, what do you thought about his fight against Kureba?
My thoughts were he hurt Koike very badly in the first round.
Mm-hmm.
And if I was going to be like an armchair quarterback, my criticism was he had that chance and didn't take advantage of it.
Yeah.
And once the fight got to the ground in the second round, it was over. That just seemed to be what happened. But I mean, he showed that Koike can be hurt on his feet, which I think we saw a little bit of in the Mikuru fight.
Yeah.
But I think Sasaki Uruka was also, I mean, he intelligently was like, I'm not going to run in there and try to knock him out because you can get knocked out yourself doing that. But I think he allowed Koike to recover, which it seemed like he was kind of surprised that he stunned Koike or something. He just didn't know how to respond to it well.
Yeah, I mean, Uruka told me that he's Cleaver's eye was still alive, so he thought that he wasn't really gone, so he didn't want to take a chance. And I can do this right now. The whole strategy was take this fight to the decision. Actually,
well, that's what was very clear to me was watching it. It was almost because I always remember back in the day when I think it was Chael Sonnen said, if you try to finish someone and don't, it's absolutely exhausting.
Yeah,
and it can make getting the decision very hard.
Right.
And so it became clear to me, it's like, oh, he's trying to go to a decision. And I thought that, it's hindsight's 2020 because he lost in the second round. I'm just like, maybe he should have pushed it a little harder in the first.
Right.
But that's just hindsight. I could say that now, but at the moment, he might have been doing the smart thing.
Right. Exactly. Could have, should have kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But that was his game plan, because when you look at the KSW fight where Clever lost, like how he went to the decision, then we were talking about that. But here's what it is. This is a very interesting thing. Even though he lost, this is 2 losses in a row, right? And a featherweight, I immediately got a fight offer for him. Immediately.
Well, it's not a bad loss because, it's kind of like to do a basketball reference. I remember I was watching that Netflix show about Michael Jordan. And Charles Barkley was like, it didn't bother me that I lost to Michael Jordan. He's the best there was. I just lost to the best guy at that moment. So Sasaki fought the guy that's, even though he's not the champion, he's clearly the best fighter in Rising's that division.
Exactly.
And he hurt him. He hurt him. He had his moments.
Right.
And he performed well. So even though he lost the fight, he did well.
Right. I think he did his job as the headliner, right? The main event of the show. And I tell you this right now, of course, immediately I got fight offer. Is interesting is I got a fight offer for him from kickboxing promotion too. Immediately after that fight.
A Japanese kickboxing promotion?
I shouldn't really elaborate too much.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
That's the only thing that makes sense. But it's interesting.
Yeah. And in very good purse and stuff.
Are you telling me that Sasaki's getting into shoot boxing? Is that what's happening? Fighting in the next S Cup?
No. But the point is, I think because of a performance instead of the results, I think his value actually kind of went up, to tell the truth, within the Japanese community.
Well, Japanese always cares about. They care about the performance, not the result as much.
Right.
If there was a Japanese fighter that did a whole lay and pray grinder thing, I think the Japanese fans would hate that person, even if he went undefeated.
I think so too. Right. So in that sense, I think Uruka is going through the right path.
Yeah. And he's quite popular. He still has a lot of fans. I don't think it's affected anything in that regard.
And he's discussing see if he should stay 145 or go back to 135. His coach and I believe that he's 135 is his best weight class. He still doesn't want to give up on 145. So our strategy
is because it's easier for him to make 145. He doesn't want to cut down.
Not necessarily. He could still cut down because this kickboxing fight, he was willing to cut to the certain weight, which was so he could still make it. But the point is, I think he still feel that he wants to try that 145.
Okay.
And even though it was against Horier and it was against Clever, come on, Horier is a UFC ex-UFC fighter,
Yeah.
He's undefeated in Rising.
He has dangerous hands from what I hear.
Right. And Kureba is undefeated in Japan. Practically, he's probably the champion, right? Almost. Right. So he's only fought one of the best. So I think our strategy is going to be asking for somebody tough again too.
Yeah.
It only makes sense, right?
Yeah. And he performed well in this fight. I mean, until it was over. But before then, he was doing fine.
And
I think Koike was kind of reckless on the feet. I think Koike was overly aggressive on the feet. It was kind of an interesting takeaway I got from the fight.
Yeah, that's true. Right. I think that's just Koike's personality, maybe, right? I mean, yeah. So this is going to be interesting. And so let's quickly talk about Deep coming up, right? Deep.
Yes.
Let's see what's Deep. Let's see. You got Deep 107.
Quick reminder, but just for a recap, on Deep 106, Daisuke Nakamura defeated Omigawa in his
fight. That's right, yeah.
At 41 years old, the guy's never looked better. And also, the one I wanted to bring up was that Tencho, the guy that fought in Rising and Shuto, got like badly knocked out. He got very knocked out.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
And his opponent is kind of this guy from AACC. I went to the AACC 20th anniversary party. So I actually saw this guy there because, I mean, his ears stick out because he has the giant cauliflower ears. And he absolutely just brutally knocked him out. And so I'm kind of had this guy on my radar now. His name is Ishizuka. That's his name, Ishizuka.
How old is he?
He is 30. Oh, he's old, 38.
Yeah, so, I mean,
7-11. 7-11 record. So that's what I'm talking about. So we all know who Tencho is because Rising brought him up and gave him a bunch of promotional materials.
Right.
And then he goes back down to local promotion. It gets destroyed.
And so was the other guy, Yuki Ito, who did pretty well in Rising.
Yeah.
Right? And he lost that fight as well. So
kind of interesting.
Yeah, so it's interesting. Deep is almost same as Rizin in that sense,
Oh yeah. And this weekend, Deep must got at some like discount rate at the new Pier Hall.
Okay.
I think they're putting on 4 events there this weekend. They're absolutely just blasting it up, and I love it. And I will say one interesting thing that came to my attention, I've been talking a lot about the Deep Jewels card this weekend, is on the pay-per-view website, it does not list the Hanakasawa Aoi Kuriyama fight on the pay-per-view. And it's not on the poster on the pay-per-view website.
They're still going to fight,
Well, they're going to fight, but nothing's been said by Deep. There's 2 possibilities: is that A, the pay-per-view website made a mistake, or B, they've been moved to the April 12th Deep card in Osaka, which would make sense because they're both from Osaka.
And maybe somebody got injured or tested positive.
Well, Siwoo Park got COVID, and her fight got pushed to the Osaka card.
Okay,
so I'm wondering if they're pushing these 2 to the Osaka card as well.
Right, but this is going to be interesting flyweight tournament for.
Oh, it's awesome! I love it.
Who's your?
I love it. What?
Who's your pick in terms of winning this whole tournament?
Oh, I mean, the 2 clear favorites are Ren Nakai and Sugiyama.
Right.
Like, everyone else just doesn't match up, but Ren Nakai and Sugiyama have both been so inactive recently. But I have to pick. It's like foolish not to pick Ren Nakai as the favorite for the tournament.
Right. Yeah. I don't think Hanako has what it takes to beat Nakai.
She's too new.
Yeah,
she's too new. Tia got beat up pretty bad by King Reina, who I think Ren Nakai would kill. Shoko Fujita has a karate background, but I just don't think she lost to Nirvana, and Nirvana's aggressive, but she's still pretty new. So I think Ren Nakai has almost 30 fights or something, and I don't think I ever remember a fight where Ren Nakai was hurt, where Ren Nakai was like in trouble.
Yeah, that's true. And let me ask you this: I should have asked. I should have done my own research. When is the final for this tournament?
Not announced. They haven't announced it yet. Obviously, typical Deep Jewels fashion. But the issue is the semifinals, they're going to do another draw to pick the fights.
Okay.
So they're doing that. I know that, but the dates haven't been announced.
But do you think this will be done by, let's say, May?
I don't think so.
You know what? Charlie, this is what it is. I think, what if the UFC does the Singapore show in June?
And one of them wants to go on that card.
Opening for a flyweight girls spot. And what if this tournament's still going on, so she can't take that fight? Can you imagine what Mr. Usami is going to do?
I don't know. I mean, I don't think Deep normally doesn't have that quick of a turnaround for their events.
Exactly right. So now,
and my thing would be, her best way to get into the UFC is to win this tournament, not just fight the first round and win.
Right.
And I was speaking to Drake, who does his podcast with Shingo. And he made it sound like Rizin is not interested in Ren Nakai at all, based off of past dealings. So I think she should just be happy that Deep Jules is willing to give her fights.
Of course.
Win the tournament, and then try to go to the UFC.
Right. But remember, let's say if this tournament goes into August and she wins it, but by then it's too late for the UFC Singapore show.
Usami will go nuts and have a stroke.
So he will go nuts.
We'll watch him have an aneurysm on Twitter.
But in a way, so like I said, who knows what's going to happen? She's old, so usually I think it's most of us say like she's too old to make it to the UFC, but who knows, right? Because of, like I say about the visa situation and stuff, if they can't only sign the Japanese fighters, she's the only one available, they might sign him,
UFC likes to pull out that too old card when it's convenient for them.
Right.
But they've signed fighters that are very old.
They re-signed Okami when he wasn't exactly too young, right?
I mean, who was that former rugby or hockey player they kept signing from Australia? The guy had extremely taped knees. And then they had Marion Rideau, what was her name?
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
She was in her 40s. I mean, they've had old fighters before.
Exactly. So it's not impossible. So
I think if Ren Nakai didn't have her management issues, any promotion in the world would want her.
I think so too, right? I mean, but again, I hope Mr. Usami's friend will listen to this, and there is a possibility. So finally, she's back in the MMA circle. If she wins this tournament, she really should sign with somebody who can talk to UFC.
Yeah.
And it ain't gonna be us though, because I'm not doing that.
I would also like to shamelessly plug the fact that but just to state that Nirvana is a hilarious fighter to follow. As I've said before, she works at the bar where all of the girls are bodybuilders.
Yeah, that's
they have a framed autograph of Ren Nakai on the wall inside of the bar. So, I mean, that's what I love about Japanese MMA. Is you get some of these characters.
Yeah, exactly.
So she's absolutely hilarious, a good follow, and she's super aggressive. So she's fighting Sugiyama in the opening round. I expect Sugiyama to win, but I expect Nirvana to not go down easily. Whereas Ren Nakai's opening fight is against Shoko Fujita, who is a karate background. So I expect Ren Nakai to take her down and finish her in the first round.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So this is going to be a tournament setup. We'll see who's going to get the drawing for the semifinal matchup. I think that's where it's going to be very interesting.
Well, I think everybody wants the Ren Nakai Sugiyama fight has to happen.
Yeah,
that's what everybody wants. That's all this tournament is about. The Sugiyama.
And I think it depends on who Hanako is going to fight in semifinal. It seems like. That's where.
Well, it's kind of funny because they got screwed because Hanako Sawa and Aoi Kuriyama trained together, so it'll be kind of interesting. I mean, Kuriyama's from Smoker Gym, and the joke I always say is that Smoker Gym they must not have a wrestling coach, and I think Hanako Sawa, if she can avoid the strikes, she'll be able to take her down really easily.
True. All right. Well, you know what? Before we go, let's talk about this. I forgot to mention to you. Did you realize who Mr. Rinya Nakamura picked to fight on Pound Storm?
Who?
Pound Storm. The main event.
That is such an awful name. Pound Storm. It sounds like the name of a terrible porn or something.
I will tell that to both of you a bit more when I have a meeting with them again, But anyway, the graduate from the Dreamers, the reality show, Mr. Rinya Nakamura and the Patrick Usami, they're the main event and the co-main.
Right.
And the fighters they pick to fight is those two guys is way more experienced than these two.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, which is very interesting because Patrick Usami is fighting Tyson Nobumitsu, who fought in Rizin.
Does Patrick Usami, he's the guy with the boxing background, correct?
Boxing guy, yeah. He fought all 5 crown in high school boxing. I think it's very interesting. And Mr. Ria Nakamura, which is a World Cadet Wrestling champion, is fighting our client, Alejandro Caetano, which is like has 30 fights. And he's like right before like getting signed with the UFC's Contender Series and stuff like that.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, that's good to see they're thinking big. I mean, we talked about it earlier. A lot of these Japanese fighters, if you beat one of these super experienced guys, it helps launch you up a little faster.
Right. I think Ria Nakamura obviously is looking to get into the UFC. So if he beat Caetano, that's a big campaign. And again, he's with the LDH, which he's a full-time employee for LDH, but he's not signed to this Pound Storm like multi-fight deal. So he could always go to UFC anytime he wants, you know?
Does your client live in Japan or is he coming over from Brazil?
Caetano is coming from Brazil.
So foreign fighters are a go.
Yes, it's a go now. It's officially. Yeah, we will find the visa and everything else this week.
Well, that's exciting news.
That is exciting news, right?
That changes almost everything for a lot of promotions in Japan.
Right, and then actually in an April show, I shouldn't say so much about it, but for the Rising fans, you can expect 2 shows to happen.
Okay.
And I know for the fact that at least 5 non-Japanese are almost close to confirm.
Oh, so I will say to some people, this is not a secret or anything like that. I just noticed that Alicia from Invicta FC, their former
she's
champion,
asking for sponsorship. Yeah, I saw that.
She saw that she was asking for sponsors and that she had an international fight offer. And to me, when I hear international fight offer, that doesn't mean Europe. That means one championship. That means Rizin. It means one of those 2.
It has to be Rizin.
Due to her size, it's got to be one of those 2. And they've talked about they want to do a Rising Super Atomweight tournament this year. And which to me, this Deep Jewels card is just the tryouts. The winner of these fights will be in the tournament.
Right.
Or some of them will. And Sakakibara will be there to watch it probably.
Right.
But Alicia's fought in Rising before. So I expect her to, I mean, it just makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. And also the fact I think Rising is looking to do in a flyweight tournament for male. So I wouldn't be surprised if we signed a couple of the so-called ex-UFC fighters.
Are these, is this Pound Storm? Is it going to be on Abema TV?
This is going to be Abema TV.
Nice.
Yeah.
We were watching Abema TV last night leading up before the Rising show. We were watching some of the kickboxing. And I mean, because say what you want about one championship, they've got my attention with the Aoki Akiyama fight. And I think they've got a lot of people's attention because my wife's friends came over and they were just like, they've never, ever talked about one championship. And they're just like, what's going on with Aoki and Akiyama? Because Aoki is so good at marketing himself because he talks so much shit that everybody hears about it.
I mean, he's almost like one-man marketing machine, you know?
I had to tell them, I'm like, you guys do realize like Akiyama is significantly bigger than Aoki. Like they're not the same weight class. And they had no idea. Like
I hate to say this, but it's not like Akiyama is like a novice grappler or anything. Like he's a judoka.
That's what I was thinking. I mean, I was trying to tell them, I'm like, if this is a striking affair, Aoki's going to get knocked out. Like Aoki's going to get knocked out by Akiyama. And good luck getting an Olympic gold medalist judo guy down.
Yeah, exactly. So this is not exactly a favorable matchup for Aoki. But Aoki even talked about it. Being a professional is not saying no to the fight. He has that mentality, you know?
Bless Aoki because he created out of nowhere a super fascinating fight because everybody hates Akiyama so much, especially since he did that. Like, he admitted to cheating and didn't apologize to Sakuraba. Like in Abema's promotional video, when Akiyama came up,
he really apologized to Sakuraba. He apologized to his mother for what he did.
Did you see that they put Nudu by his name when he came up? Like even one championship's like promoting him. Like, Abema is like, oh, it's the slippery guy.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know if you know this, but a long time ago, Akiyama was on this Japanese variety show, and he even talked about how his mother uses specific softener so he can make his gi slippery. So his mother is in it too, you know. But he apologized to his mother, you know.
Yeah, never. Yeah, oh my god. So like this, if Aoki beats Akiyama, he will become a national hero because Aoki is a polarizing figure. People like him or hate him. But if he beats Akiyama, there'll be like a brief moment where everybody loves him.
Right. But who knows, right? I mean, I think the chances of Aoki winning this one is not that big, you know?
No, not at all. But I mean, it looks like One Championship's making some kind of Japan push, though, because this March card of theirs is filled with Japanese fighters. I mean, they have Aoki, they have Itsuki Hirata, they have Wakamatsu, they have everybody fighting on these cards.
Yeah. I mean, I know the reason why, but I can't talk about it. But, you know, I think they have realized that there's a potential in the Japanese market, I think.
Well, I mean, they also brought VV May back for a grappling match. So it seems very clear that they're like trying to get as many Japanese fighters on this card as possible.
Yeah, I mean, there's a plus side to One Championship for putting our Japanese fighters in there. So,
yeah. Well, that's it. The smart move about putting all the Japanese fighters on this card is that Itsuki's so popular on Abema that people watch events with her on it, and when she's not on it, they don't watch them.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
If they put all these other fighters on the card with her, people are going to realize that One Championship has a bunch of Japanese fighters.
Yeah, I mean, it's really strange in a sense, as you know, like many elderly people in Japan still doesn't watch no streaming sites or Abema or none of that, right? And even in my generation, guys in 50s who is the business owner who sponsors our clients, many of them still only watch television.
Yeah, they watch like NHK.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know, it's not the streaming. They don't even watch Abema TV, even though it's so easy to watch it, you know, on your cell phone.
It's free.
Like that. And exactly. And still they have this mentality for some reason, if they're not on the national television, it doesn't worth it. You know what I mean? Like it's right, which is not true at all, you know?
Well, that's what's kind of interesting about all these One Championship fighters is that fighters like Itsuki Hirata, my general feeling is that most of her fans aren't Japanese. That most of her fans are foreign, like from like countries she's fighting in.
Itsuki Hirata is a good example. She's very popular in Abema TV audience, right? That's clearly a different audience from like the guys we just talked about, you know, those business owners, 50s and 60s. And they wouldn't even care. They wouldn't even know who she is, you know? They would be more into Miyu Yamamoto, or, you know, Kanazaki and stuff. So it's
my friends that did come over, they asked me about Itsuki, and it was funny. They don't know anything about her fighting. They just know that she got signed by Monster Energy.
Right.
So it's kind of interesting what news breaks through to the mainstream.
Right, in terms of, especially in the Japanese market, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
So it's a totally different, you know, different market there. So, but anyway, so I think we talked a lot this week too. And I think
we'll have a ton of results to go over in 2 weeks. March is absolutely filled with events.
Right. And let's see, by then, I think we can talk about what Ren is going to do. And by then, we'll probably have an Aoki back in New York by then. Who knows, you know?
Or we could just do a 2-hour preview of Karen Date's next fight and only talk about Team Date since she's fighting at the end of the month. A 2-hour Karen Date preview show.
You know what? You should go over there with the camera and do a whole documentary about it. You have to.
I'm planning it. It is in the works. Don't you worry about that.
I mean, this could be a Netflix documentary. Who knows?
I'm willing to do anything. She's obsessed with baking. I'm like, if you don't want to talk about fighting, I will go there and film you baking. I will do anything. I got to get more Karen Date content.
Shoot everything you can. Get all the elements in while you can, you know? Yeah,
anyway,
so I'll be very excited to see that, you know?
Perfect.
Okay.
And I will see everyone else again in 2 weeks.
All right. And I'll see you later. And thank you for listening, everybody, right?
Oh, wow. Okay. I apologize to everybody. I'm so bad at looking at the comments. I didn't realize people were commenting.
Yeah, I know. Me too. I just realized that. But I think we kind of, what do you expect from Poundstorm signing about something?
I'm glad that somebody got my joke about Horie having dangerous hands. Yes.
Yeah, I saw that too. Poundstorm, I'm trying to push them to get more non-Japanese guys in there because it's nice to have more, you know, international feel to it. But we'll see, you know.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. All right. So I'll see you in 2 weeks.
Yep. See you in 2 weeks.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for listening, everybody.